and welcome to another episode of Cram Sesh on Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey.
And I'm Reena, and hi.
Hello.
Today we're talking about some childhood favorites.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna end up being a decent amount of these kind of episodes, because a lot of it is re-upping on older franchises. So we are going
love
to
nostalgia here. We love it.
Yeah. Not afraid to criticize it, as we will on this one and on certainly the Raimi Spider-Man ones. But today we're going to talk about Ghostbusters 1 and Ghostbusters 2. And that's all going to lead into the upcoming Ghostbusters Afterlife in a couple days. Quote.
Yeah, totally.
This is not early recording at all. But yeah,
However, I would like to say we're not covering the last Ghostbusters, not because we didn't like it, but because it doesn't lead into Ghostbusters Afterlife. It's not part of that story. That's the only reason.
Correct. Because we both enjoyed that movie. And
yes.
It's just not coming up here. Yeah. Cool. Let's start out with history with the franchise. What was your connection to Ghostbusters like through your life?
The cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
That really was my first exposure, was the cartoon. I don't think I saw the movies until I was a little bit older, and I think I saw the second one first, which scared the shit out of me. But anyway, yeah, it was that, and it was Ecto Cooler.
Yeah.
Who didn't love Ecto Cooler? Okay, so that's really...
Listen, yeah, I got a case of it in 2016 when the reboot movie came out. It's fine.
I mean, like, our heyday was, you know, almost everything had a Saturday morning cartoon. Like, we really were in that sweet spot. So that was kind of my first exposure to the Ghostbusters franchise, was the cartoon.
Yeah, so for me, I don't know if I saw the cartoon or the movie first. I saw both of them very early. The first time I saw the movie, I was probably like 2 years old because I'm the youngest of three, and 4 years behind my brother, 6 years behind my sister. So my uncle would show us movies that were probably not appropriate for a 2-year-old to watch. So I don't know which came first, but when I was real young, and before it even be like, because then I transferred to like Ninja Turtles and Marvel and stuff like that later, but I was all in on Ghostbusters before that stuff got to me, because the cartoon was just a good, like, connected to the movie, but like in a Batman the Animated Series way, like sort of had a continuation that overrode what the movies were doing. And like, I had, from my daycare, I took a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man toy that was about this big. They never got that back. I also had the real Ghostbusters thermos and lunchbox, the exact one that was in Superbad, that he kept all of his like drawing utensils and would draw dicks with, except mine was red where that one was blue. So yeah, it's this franchise, I would say, longer than like even Star Wars or Marvel or whatever, goes back as far as I can remember for me. So I have an affinity for this franchise regardless of versions or whatever, and we'll get to like 2 after we get to 1, but like 2's not the best movie, but I still enjoy it a great deal, despite that. So yeah, why don't we, with that settled, why don't we jump into 1?
So I know a lot about 1, actually, because I watched the Movies That Made Us episode fairly recently. So yeah, we could jump into 1, but one of the things I want to say up front, I did not know that Dan Aykroyd came from a family of paranormal investigators.
He's a weird guy.
No, that's not weird. That's amazing to me.
No. I mean, like, beyond that. That's one of the simple things for for Aykroyd. He there's
That
some
played a part with his involvement in this movie.
Yes, yeah. I think he pulled upon his real life a little bit for that, because he is, to this day, very much an alien guy and just a paranormal guy in general, like, but not in the level-headed way that I think a lot of people who are into that thing, like that kind of stuff, are.
What if it was aliens?
He's a little more deep end than I would say. He goes beyond the Tom DeLonge
I like
level,
that's
which
part of the
is a
scale.
pretty supreme. That's a pretty high level at that point already. But yeah. So first Ghostbusters movie is about as perfect of a, I don't want to say comedy, because I don't think of it as a comedy. It has humor, but I think it's just an all around like balanced movie. And that movie is an interesting one because there's no hero arc really. There's
No.
like, Venkman doesn't change. He's just
No.
he's the same asshole through the whole movie. He's generally like a creep through a lot of this movie.
Oh yeah, when he's in her apartment.
Yeah. And it's funny because there's stuff in that scene that I still think is funny, and then there's some stuff that I think is like, ooh boy, even at the time.
Right.
But like, when he lifts up the little, like, the guard for the piano keys and just goes, I'm like, they hate this. Like, it's so perfectly done that like I kind of overlook the other stuff still.
And they let him just kind of run with things. Like, Harold Ramis did like an amazing job of like just kind of capturing the essence of Bill Murray at that time period.
Well, and it wasn't even supposed to be Bill Murray. That was supposed to be Belushi. So yeah. Mm-hmm. And then like Rick Moranis was supposed to be my brain just went flat.
Egon?
No. Rick Moranis was supposed to be John Candy originally.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting stuff with this movie that's like, it worked out well because other things didn't work out.
I don't even think they paid John Candy. I think he just like did it as a favor or something like that.
Well, John Candy turned down the role because he wanted like, or he kind of left on his own because he was like, I want to do these things, and they were like, no. And then Rick Moranis came in and kind of did a John Candy nerdy guy a little bit anyway. But they probably just toned it down a little bit, because I have a feeling it probably would have just ended up being John Candy in National Lampoon's Vacation, where he's like the over the top John Candy nerd. And they probably wanted to pull it back like from an 11 to a 9, because it's still pretty intense on that meter. But yeah, I just don't. It's weird to like have one of these conversations, because what is there to say, kind of?
Well, I mean, I think they did a really good job with creating a complex and unique story, because the whole idea of like a parallel dimension and this like evildoer coming through, and the gatekeeper and the key like that is so far out there.
Yeah.
Versus just, dealing with straight up like ghosts, right?
Well, that's
like
the thing
Slimer
is,
and
you
things
almost
like that. Like,
you almost think of like, this is clearly made as a standalone movie, whereas now it would be made as a trilogy, and so like you wouldn't get the Gozer stuff and all that like deep lore. Maybe in a tease towards like the end of the movie or like a post-credit scene, you wouldn't get it as the second half of the whole movie. Like the first half of this movie is just them going on like a ghost adventure, and then the second half of the movie
would have been fine. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And that's probably where it would have stuck as a strict, like, more just comedy. Whereas, like, this is a more balanced, like, general enjoying movie, horror movie, comedy, kind of all together. And it's interesting because it's just a weird, enjoyable thing to be able to watch, as opposed to, like, what's coming next. And even with sequels and reboots and even the cartoons, because Extreme Ghostbusters happened too, and that was actually very good. And the video game that came out in like 2013, which is technically like Ghostbusters 3. But even with all of that, like you can sit down and there's not that much connective tissue to really like bring it into that shared universe stuff of sequels and games and what have you. It's just, this movie is standalone, and I appreciate that a great deal, because you don't have to worry about the baggage of if stuff is, up to par with this or not as good or whatever. And yeah, it's I revisit it every couple of years, and so it's maybe that would change if I went back to it every year for Halloween, or like watched it whenever during the year. But it was a very, very good thing to revisit again, even with the new eyes on like seeing things continually start to age a little bit. So yeah.
Well, another interesting thing I think is that they filmed in New York, and they only had so much time to film it. So all those crowd scenes, those are actual people that are just there.
They're just cool. They're happy seeing Bill Murray and like other stars from SNL and stuff. It's yeah.
I still think it's funny that they'd already shot the movie and they had to shoot like 2 different names because Ghostbusters like was already like trademarked or something.
Well, yeah, it was a live action show which included a gorilla, or a man in a gorilla suit. And then when this came out after the fact, they licensed the name Ghostbusters for it. Mm-hmm. I think it was Universal that owned it. And then that franchise, when the real Ghostbusters was being turned into a cartoon, they, like a month before or something, the real Ghostbusters cartoon debuted, they dropped animated episodes of the original Ghostbusters thing. And so it was very cash grabby and trying to like play off of the success of this movie and stuff, which is interesting. But what you say about New York is sort of interesting too, because we'll talk about this again when we do Spider-Man. But it's interesting how this sort of like Hollywood timeless era of New York sort of feels connected to so many different things. Like, this feels like the same New York as like Raimi's Spider-Man. This feels like the same New York as the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie to me. Like, it's interesting.
New York is Home Alone too.
A little bit. A little more grounded there, though. But
that's the first movie that came to mind when you started talking about New York movies.
For me, it all kind of vibes in the same heightened reality way that, like, when you see certain things, like certain sets in this movie, like, that is clearly a set. And you get that in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. You get that in that Ninja Turtles movie and stuff. And it sort of all vibes in a way that works, where a lot of the time, if you're going for realism, for me, that won't work and it'll take me out of it. But for these movies, because it is so heightened and everyone is a lot more like exaggerated, outside of like Dana is like the one person in this movie that's a little more like normal person. It actually works to push the idea of it being such an exaggerated version of the world that they're living in, the circumstances they're dealing with and stuff. So, yeah, it's a really cool thing they managed to do, even though they are like clearly in a lot of it real New York. But like the interiors of the Sedgwick stuff is all like a set in Los Angeles. Whereas externally it is just the building in New York. And it actually, they have 2 different actors playing the same doorman at certain points of the movie too. But yeah, it's one of those movies that just, as much as it has its issues through time, as we as a society get better about certain things, hopefully. It's interesting how that doesn't really affect this movie. Like, I don't think I think any less of this movie because I now can realize like Venkman is not a hero. Like when you're a kid, you just see the person as the protagonist, as the hero. And so now with, a better worldview, you can differentiate and still be like, no, this is just the story of these guys who started a business and it happens to be ghost busting.
Mm.
So yeah.
Oh yeah, so he's a skis. Like, I mean, welcome to men. Like, but I mean, at least it was Bill Murray. But anyway, I mean, I think because it's such a truly unique and original property, we don't really run into
Outside of the name.
Outside of the name, I don't think we run into too many things that would age poorly because the core of the story is like so interesting, and that kind of like these are just minor things around the performances and around certain character flaws or whatever.
Yeah.
But it doesn't impact the story in a way where we go, ooh, that really doesn't fly right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's, that's a relief because, anytime like it's not the same thing, but like, so like Jaws is one of the best movies of all time. I didn't read the book that it's based on until like 2 years ago. That's just a bad book. It's not a good book at all. It's also super racist and like full of just like misogynist it's like it's a really screwed up book. So it's one of those things where like granted I don't know that many people who love the book for that, but it's one of those things where it's like with time that has clearly become a worse work. But yeah, this just like
aside from the Dana stuff, there's not too much. There's really not too much. Like if you're looking at like Janine and Egon's like flirty relationship, like that's really cute.
That's so good.
It's so good. Like, do you know what I mean?
And it's one of the one thing. It's one of the things that's a bummer in the next movie. There's still good stuff with that too, like funny stuff, but it's not as yeah.
Like that was like adorable. I don't know, and again, that like stands the test. Like we just got really excited even just talking about it now.
Yeah.
Bill Murray's gonna Bill Murray.
Yeah. and we'll see him in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania soon. So.
Ooh, exciting! I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, wasn't announced. He just said it in an interview. So, because he's Bill Murray and he's just gonna do whatever he wants to.
He just showed up one day. Yeah. They were like, "All right, Bill, you're in the movie."
You no longer get the Marvel secrecy as soon as you say, "Hey, you want to be in this movie?" Okay, so let's jump on to the next movie then. So Ghostbusters 2, because the first movie is all around, I think, pretty agreed upon on how good it is. But like the second movie, I think people tend to give this movie a lot more credit than it's due. Ghostbusters 2.
I might be one of those people.
Yeah, I don't think Ghostbusters 2 is a good movie. I think it is a lazy cash grab of a movie, and it's sort of on record that it is. And it's just the same movie again, pretty much.
It just has slime instead of Stay Puft.
Well, I mean, instead of Stay Puft, it has the Statue of Liberty. So, like, not as a villain character, but just like a kaiju. It still has a kaiju, very much. And it goes to the extent of like the design work for it, where why would the Ghost logo on their uniforms be doing this to signify that it is Ghostbusters 2? Like, that wouldn't... They would just have the normal Ghostbusters.
Maybe they're like me in a photo.
Yeah. But, like, it's... Like, it's hanging from the building. The Ghostbusters 2 movie logo is hanging from their building, where the ghost is pointing up the number 2. And it's that kind of stuff where I'm like, that is indicative of the whole movie for me. Where it's I think because of the success of the cartoon, they leaned way more into the comedy aspect, and it didn't work as well for me.
Mm.
And the like the just the way everybody acts in this movie is like turn it up to 20 instead of being like just heightened. And it's frustrating because like as a kid I did like this movie a lot more, and the more I realize like it's just the same movie with it's like Wayne's World to Wayne's World 2,
Mm.
where I'm like it's not like, and this is I'm gonna come up with this a lot because it's I just went through both of the Ghostbusters movies and the Raimi trilogy in the last week. Sam Raimi did that with Spider-Man into Spider-Man 2, just like he did with Evil Dead into Evil Dead 2. But he was able to improve. And for me, if you're just doing the same thing in doing the same thing, it's detrimental because why am I going through it a second time at that point? If you're not like going to the next level with doing the same thing. So, yeah.
I mean, I think I liked it because I felt like it actually scared me and stuck with me because I think Vigo the Carpathian is terrifying. And I have been fortunate enough to visit Lucasfilms in San Francisco, and they have a Ghostbusters alcove, and that painting
Yeah.
is hanging there, and it is terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. Um, I mean,
I
like,
think it would be if Peter McNichols wasn't playing a cartoon character. It sort of canceled it for me.
but it like you can. I mean, if you're looking, it's a giant. It is like a full size painting because you know
Yeah.
Lucasfilms loves matte paintings and all that stuff. But it feels like it's watching you.
Yeah,
It
I
really
mean
does.
it's
So
painted
I
very
mean,
well in that way that it's supposed to, but like I think the for me the other things in the movie make it less scary to me
the
because
baby stuff.
well the baby stuff we can like get further into too, but like it's just the baby stuff is fine, but like why have so like when the old lady ghost that is Peter McNichols' character, why not just have it be like an old lady ghost? Why have it be Peter McNichols' character? Like it's a weird there's just these weird decisions in this movie that, like I said at the beginning, I don't love using the term lazy for movie making because movie making is a very labor intensive thing, but like the decisions that are made in this movie feel like they're haphazard at best and lazy at worst, where it's just like I don't understand, like there's nothing in this movie that would make Dana and Peter like get back together, but they do. Like there's nothing about them in this movie that feels naturally moving towards them getting back together. It's all of it feels that way to me, and it sucks because I did like this movie a lot more growing up because like you it was like I saw it so early that like I don't know if I saw this one first or the first one first or what have you. And so yeah, time ruins for me on this one, unfortunately.
I mean, maybe I have a fondness for this as well because it reminds me of my dearly departed English bulldog, who also had a river of pink slime flowing freely from his mouth. So
That is true.
that could be it.
There's a lot more
And you need
foamy.
it's a little foamy.
Yeah.
But you know what? You got to charge it. You got to give it lots of positive reinforcement, or it just gets very angry. Same principle. Same principle.
He kind of just did that anyway.
There
But
is no Dozer. There is only Zool. Tying it back to the first one, he did remind me of the dogs.
yeah, I was about to say you mean Gozer because Dozer Gozer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the
You know his name is Dozer.
yeah.
That was the joke.
Yeah. The fun fact about Oscar, though, the baby in this movie, is I had that same onesie, the Winnie the Pooh onesie, when I was a baby, except mine was red.
Oh.
Um, but yeah, it's I will give a very the best thing about this movie is Bobby Brown's Take Control. Is a fantastic song. I still love that song to this day. But yeah, I have, like, we were just talking about Egon and Janine and how great that, like, her flirtation towards him is in that first movie. And it's nowhere. She has, like, moved on to Lewis, and it's like, that's played for comedy and that's fine, but it's like, there was a nice little, like, go for it feeling in the first movie, whereas this one is just like, they ripped it away. And it sucks. Like, that sucks so much, because that is one of the really nice things in that first movie.
I mean, she has a type.
I mean, I guess glasses. They're very different kinds of nerds. But, yeah.
Listen, as someone else who has a type that includes glasses, I can see it. Also, I adore Rick Moranis.
Oh, so do I. I again think he's better in the first movie than this movie. But I do like where they go with him being like, because they end the last movie with, well, I want to go in the car with them. And he gets to be in the car with them, sort of, with, you know, the end of this movie. But yeah, it unfortunately, the second movie for me just feels repetitive and doesn't really improve on anything. And, like, just like I don't like using lazy as a term, I also don't like feeling unnecessary as a term for a movie, because, like, all movies are unnecessary, but, like, in terms of the story that we already got, this all kind of just feels unnecessary, as it's just rehashing. And it's hard for me to pick out anything where I'm like, sweet, awesome in this movie because of that. Yeah.
I mean, I liked it. I mean, I'm not as critical of it, but again, I mean, I think you're a bigger Ghostbusters fan than I am. Not like I'm not a fan, but, like, if I was naming my, like, favorite movie franchises, like, I don't think that would, like, pop up.
You didn't spend you know, $300 on Ghostbusters board games, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm like, no. Like,
I am that person that did that, yes. But yeah,
like,
it's...
I think my mom kept me too busy with, like, so many activities that, like, I didn't really consume a lot of media until, like, I was a little bit older.
Yeah, I was raised by TV. So
I was like, I
worked.
had soccer and I had dance class, and I mean, I played soccer year round, and I was in Girl Scouts, and I'm trying to think of everything else like that I did. And then when I got a little older, I was doing theater and horseback riding. I can't even think of what, like, how many different things I was doing at, like, any given time. So
Yeah.
it took me a while to even watch things. That's why, like, I feel like 1992-93 is where, like, my consumption of media really started.
Yeah, and this is before that. So
yeah, exactly. So I was, like, late to the game there.
Yeah, and, like, for you at that point, if you don't have the association, I guess it's everything's sort of the same level. So,
you
like,
know how I rate things too? Like, that's a great Sunday afternoon movie.
oh yeah, I mean, I do that too with, like, the Saturday afternoon on cable, where it's like, it's got commercials, but whatever, I'm just laying here anyway.
Like, I'm staying in my sweatpants today. This is perfect.
Yeah, and for me, I would say this doesn't hit that point. And it's a bummer, because everybody involved is fantastic, and it is one of the things where, like, I adore Harold Ramis. Harold Ramis is one of my favorite writers and directors of all time. I love SCTV. A lot of that is because of him. And so yeah, it's a bummer to revisit something like this, because the first movie I watch a ton comparatively to this, which I probably haven't seen in 10 or 11 years outside of, like, a scene here and there or whatever. So yeah, it's just it's a bummer for sure, even though, like, I knew already, like, it doesn't live up to the first one no matter what, but, like, to revisit it and feel this negatively towards it, it's not a good feeling. It feels bad. And I don't blame the movie for me feeling bad about that. I'm just like, oh man, I wish I still felt that about this movie. Yeah.
Cool. I'm excited to see what they do with the new one.
Yeah, I am hoping to, because like in the trailer they tease Ray's shop and stuff, and so I'm hoping that there is some of that lore explained. I'm not hoping it necessarily reaches the Force Awakens feeling that, you know, that movie gave, but that it's able to recapture a little bit of something more so from the first movie, with doing a little bit new, because like obviously, like I just said, I don't want it to just be they happen to be in the Midwest, but it's the same movie again. So yeah,
I don't think it will be. It seems a little bit different.
I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that's teasing, just specifically the first movie. It's a big statue in the background of like the underground area where it's just the actress who popped out first as Gozer before the Stay Puft. So we'll see, but yeah, hoping for the best, keeping my expectations simmering.
Level.
Yeah. I'm letting myself get excited, but not letting myself boil over. That's where we're at. So yeah.
Cool.
And you got any more Ghostbusters in you, or is that it?
I mean, other than thinking about seeing the Slimer robots, which I also didn't mention, was really, really cool. And then they also had the escaped convicts. Those are like up top, and those are also really, really scary.
The Scolari brothers.
But yeah, I don't know. It made me like marshmallow. I feel like I want a hot chocolate with marshmallows in it now.
Yeah, much like Quicksand, there was a lot of fear in childhood of marshmallows compared to what we actually encounter in real life. Cool. I just realized.
I feel like that's something I would do, by the way. Like, don't clear your mind, and I would think of something totally random.
Yeah.
That was a relatable moment for me in the first movie.
Yeah.
What did you do?
Well, that's a lot of what the first movie is good with, is just like the interactions with people are just fantastic. And the second movie, it's just kind of like they're just kind of there. So, yeah. Cool. Well, we will be back with an episode on Ghostbusters Afterlife as that releases in a couple days. And so we will see you then.